Today we are going to take low end of this track, mix it and turn into this, so that we can solve this low end mixing problem once for all. I also just created my first kick sample pack, total of 280 kick samples. I also handpicked 10 of them, and those will be free to download. Links on the description so you can just get them free. I will go through the kicks a little bit at the end of the video. I don't want to steal the time of the people who is here for the mixing tutorial. So let's hop in. First step is the most controversial one, and that is don't trust your ear when you are mixing your low end. What does that mean? That means that when you are sitting in a room, every room, if it is not treated, has a room mode, a frequency response. That means that what you hear while you are sitting in your chair is not the same what you should be hearing. Although people really don't understand how significant this is. I want to show you two different graphs just to help you grasp a little bit the idea. This is a regular, one of the most common frequency response for a living room. That means that depending on the frequency that you're hearing, the volume that you are hearing will be completely different. So, for example, you'll be hearing 40 Hz, almost 20 dB louder than what you are hearing 60 Hz. And then you see all these resonances going up and down. 20 Hz difference. It is huge, and this is only the one side of the coin. And depending on the resonance in your room, actually you will have also ringing of the frequencies, meaning that some of the frequency will be reverbing longer than others. Like this one, right? It basically says that around 40 Hz, for example, here, that rings at that reverberates so that it will be sustained longer while the others are shorter. So it will also make everything a bit muddier when you have this frequency here, just simply because they reverberate longer. What does that mean? I will just demonstrate this one. So we will be dealing with this track. What I did to help you understand is that I created this EQ, not exactly the same, but it's similar to the one that we've seen. So I will just turn this on and off so that you can understand how much room is changing the thing that you're hearing. It's not exactly right to do like this, but it's a good way to demonstrate the point. I will turn on and off and see how much difference it makes on your low end. Now we are thinking like, no problem because I'm using my headphone. You will have the same issues with the headphones. This time the problem is, for example, how deep your headphones can reproduce the sound. Let me show you another one. This is a frequency response of DT1990, one of the below headphones. Just take a look at how much roll-off it happens when you go down below 100 Hz. That means that the deeper the sound goes, the less that you are hearing. And this right here, the reason why the new beginners tends to boost low end, especially subs, more than it should be. And that is the reason why you shouldn't trust your ears, because that's exactly what they hear. They hear less sub and they tend to boost the subs. And then, because the translation is not correct with their headphones, we end up a mix with a lot of subs. So if you go back, what is the resolution? The resolution is, of course, treat your room so that you can flatten that curve as much as possible. I know it's not possible for elder people. The other thing that elder producers that I know do is they stick to the same headphone for a really long time. That means that they listen to a lot of reference track, good tracks with the same headphones, so they know exactly how the sub should be sounding, so that they can compensate their own mix, because they know around how it should be, even though maybe it's a bit louder, a bit less louder, a bit resonant in some parts, because they understand and build the experience with it. So that headphones becomes the best headphone for them, because they know exactly how it sounds. The second point is treat your sub bass as a separate instrument. What do I mean by that? So I have this track here right now and sounds like this. So we have only one single sub bass. It's sounding really cool. Sounds like this. The cool part of the sound comes with a lot of velocity modulation. Like you see, this velocity goes to the levels, here level, and we have the unison, we have really nice envelopes, we have some choruses and reverbs and so on. So the sound is really sweet. Having single bass like this and try to mix it is a nightmare, because you have to compress it so the levels are not differentiating. But if you do so much compressing and so much extra EQing, the sound will be never the sound that you are hearing here. So easiest solution I always stand, separate your sub from your bass so that you can treat them separately. Anything below 60 Hz oftentimes accepted as the sub bass in techno and house music at least. So what I would do in this case, I will duplicate this and create a really super simple sub bass sound. And maybe I can put an EQ, cut all the highs. Smooth out here if I want to use the other guy here. What I want to do now, just take this EQ, put it the other way around, put it here. Instead of low cut, I can turn it this one into high pass, exactly the same part. Maybe we can let a bit more. That means that now I kept all the beauty, all the nice things about this high end, but I don't need to deal with all these problems with the lows. Here you can, if you feel like it's too dark, you can open it up. Maybe something like this, right? Together again. Balance them nicely. Together with the kick. If you are having trouble, I would always suggest, like, first you can balance them kick and sub together. It's always much easier. Something like this. Once you feel confident about the low end, you can bring the high end as well. And at this point, it's really up to you. You can exaggerate the high end if you want it to be more like a lead bass sound, so you can be louder, or it could be quieter if you have another lead sound. At this point, it's completely up to you. Everything is much easier. This brings us to the third point. And the third point being is that aim for the easy frequencies. This one went easily because probably we are hearing a bit easier. Also, sub feels like a sub. And the main reason is that if you turn on the notes, we can see that we are really dancing around here. And maybe C sharp we can include as well. What does that mean? I have another serum here just to showcase you what I mean, to illustrate it a bit more, a bit easier. We have simple E2 here. So a sub bass playing. Sounds like this. It sounds like a sub. There's nothing wrong with it. Everything is fine. The problem here is, though, if you take a look at the frequency range, we are hitting around 41, 42 Hertz, and which we tend to say that one of the sweet spot for the sub bass. I want you to take a listen one more time when I move this note to B and trying to use the B as my sub. Suddenly it lost all its power. It feels too quiet, it feels too weak. The main reason being is that if we play it, B is hitting around 31 Hz. Human ear tends to not hear anything below 20 Hz, most of the people, and I would say maybe even 80% cannot even really hear below 25 Hz. What happens here, though, when we are around 31 Hz, we are really close to that limit, so that we really barely hear the sound. It's too close to the limit that we can hear. The same similar results happens, for example, when I take the B, put it all the way one octave up, B2, and now take a look what happens. We are around 62 Hz, we have gone over like that 60 Hz limit, and now it suddenly feels like a bass sound than a sub bass sound. It's a bit too bright. So if we take a look at the sweet spot, the notes that's really easy to fix for the sub is, and take a look at here. Here you can see the notes, and when I scroll here, you can see the changes in the frequency range. Right around 40 Hz, we have E, and if we just scroll up, we have F, and then we have G, and then around 54, we have the A. And If you enjoyed the video up to now, if you feel like it's adding something to you, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. It really helps and I really appreciate it. But let's continue. This is supposed to be like the highest sub-bass note that you can use. I don't like A form because I'm making melodic techno. I like this darker stuff, and A tends to be a bit too bright for my taste. For example, like this. Yes, it sounds more like a sub-bass, but no, it is a bit too bright for my taste. So sweet spot, come back. If you want to make it easier for you, especially in the beginning, choose in between these three: E, F, and G. If you really want to go dark, you can maybe pick the D. But I will suggest stay in these three and you are good. Which brings us to the next point, which is very logical. That means that when you are making your sub bass or kick or anything, you can easily cut the low end below 20 Hz. This is an unnecessary information if I play the kick. Probably you won't even hear, and it's just will eat up from your headroom. Take that away. I oftentimes lately go up to 25 Hz, really, because I feel like it's still fine. I can get away with it and make my tracks sounding a bit more louder. Which brings us to the next point. Make sure that your sub volumes are consistent. We have done this, for example, with the subs that we are looking, but what we have done, for example, here, we take down the random. So every time it has exactly the same point and we take it here, so the phase is always same, it will most of the time have that kind of really consistent sound. What happens oftentimes, for example, when you use the sub, if you have, for example, stereo image in your sub bass, it is okay, you can have stereo sub, especially if you don't exaggerate it, something like this, for example, and maybe something like this, maybe detune a bit less. Make sure that your volume levels are consistent. So what I would suggest is oftentimes put a compressor, go a bit more aggressive with the ratio. You see that it's sometimes compressing more, sometimes less. It's just try to fix that volume difference. But easiest way to fix that issue, if you want to have like a bit more stereo sub, keep your sub below 6 Hz, more mono, and above 6 Hz to maybe 200 Hz. You have a bit more room for the stereo. But for this case, I'm gonna keep it here because I have already my upper layer with a lot of stereo information here. And here I care less if the volume levels are changing. I actually kind of enjoy it because now it feels a bit more analog feel, a bit dynamic feel, and it will create less problem with the mix and over stereo image. And the other point is tune your kick. And there's one of the hard problems that you will have. How do you tune a kick? And let me take a kick from our core sample pack. When you tune the kick, what people mean that you should tune the tail of the kick. The initial part here, you won't be hearing any tune because it's a fast pitch modulation, so there's no pitch really. And on the tail part here though, you will hear it's almost like a sub bass. And it will be much easier to hear the tune. If you're not hearing it, put a tuner, and in front of tuner put an EQ. Take the highs, because it's not the part that you're hearing. Make it easier for the tuner to hear what it's hearing. Sometimes it's longer, maybe here it starts, now you see that's much more stable. So you have to play around where you are doing, and you have to maybe play around a bit more here, how much you have to cut. Once you have done this, there's two ways to deal with this problem. You can straight ahead tune this one. Let's say we want to tune it like to another notes, you can just transpose it here on the Bs. And now we are on the D, it's tuned to the D. This brings a problem. There's the reason that I create my kick sample pack. If you do that, you will lose the timbre of the attack in the beginning of the kick, this part. So this will be sounding different from this. And sometimes you actually want to keep this part alive or keep this part same, but tune the tail. What you can do oftentimes is like, you can either cut it this way, right? And then tune this part, but this oftentimes results with a bit artifacts in between. And then if I go, for example, from here to here, in this case, it turn out to be good. But other thing that you can do is you can separate the tail with a splitter. It's a bit more complicated concept. Splitter mean that you can take, for example, this EQ here, and duplicate this. And we take the 8 and turn it to the high pass instead now. And here we will be hearing the higher part. Then just freeze these two and flatten. And you tune the tail, so this part, let's tune it 5 semitones up and keep the other part intact, but probably shorten this up because I see that there are still things coming in. Something like this together. Now you have much more consistent results. The better version of it actually splitting into 3 so that you can only focus on the areas that you are you want to do. And there's a reason, like I said, I created my sample pack. I did it like 1 by 1 for all the others different kicks so that we have in every timbre like F1, G1, D1, E1. The timbre is the same, but the tail is tuned in different keys so that you can keep the same timbre in different keys. Good. That brings us to the most important part about mixing. The rule of thumb is do the dynamic mixing in the beginning, do the static mixing at the end. What does even dynamic mixing mean? Dynamic mixing is rather than just having notches here and there, changing the volume of the sound. That effectively means that when we play this kick in the F, we have this long tail on the F, which is almost like a sub bass. And if we try to play the sub bass together with this kick, especially in this part, in the first hit, we are having 2 sub bass at the same time. The easiest way is of course sidechain the kick. What you should be doing, compression, sidechain the kick, in this case 16 is our kick. I'm going to turn the kick off so that you can hear the sub bass, what's happening. Take a look at the volume level of the sub. So what happens is when the kick hits, sub bass is decreasing the volume with the sidechain. And when the kick disappears, we are opening up again, and then now we can hear the sub bass. Take a listen again. And together with the kick. You have to decide how is good. My often suggestion is like turn off the kick, listen, go all the way down. Something like this already is good enough, is you can definitely hear at the quietness in the beginning and then coming back, and then play with the kick and make the fine adjustment afterwards. Make it really drastic for the sub bass so that it really ducks. For the other parts, other elements, pads, upper layer of the bass sound, keep using the sidechain dynamic mixing simply because it will still keep your kick more audible, giving the space even though they are not exactly the same area. And more importantly, it will make your track glued all together much more. So here I'm gonna take this, the same. Let's solo this guy instead. But this time we don't need to go this exaggerated, so we can keep it a bit less, but we can still feel the groove here. Just like that. And together one more time, let's listen. The other thing that is important here is that kick samples, like the one here that I'm using, comes oftentimes a bit longer tail than usual because in case if you need it. What you can easily do if you are using, for example, sampler, you can do the same thing. Play around with this fader or the length and see how it affects the sub. I feel like this around is good enough and we don't need to occupy all this area that the other kicks occupy, right? So we can just delay this. And once this one done, you can definitely go for here and add something like a glue compressor to make it maybe a bit more glued altogether. You don't need to do this one, and it's easier to make this one wrong and right. For example, one of the things that glue compressor does, if you don't have experience with it, the moment that you bring that threshold, it will duck your low end, especially sub, much more than your highs. You can definitely hear that sub is gone. This is very useful if you're a beginner and you tend to exaggerate the subs. Putting a glue compressor tends to kind of roll that up naturally. You can hear, first it grabs the kick and then there comes the sub and then it stays there. So it's like that. I like to use the slower attack. Slow release, fast release, it depends a bit for the type, but for me this is good enough. But it happens that if you are happy with your low end, and if you are unhappy with the amount that sub disappeared due to glue compressor, to get that really analog vibe, you can use channel strips here. Just have this smooth, nice low end shelf. For example, channel EQ in this case in Ableton is pretty cool for this one. So what I tend to do, I tend to take a little bit low with the glue and boost a little bit with the channel EQ. It just gives a bit more analog vibe to my ears. And then you can have this kind of a bit mid cut to make it really this tape-ish side sound. Let me do an A/B so that you can see the difference. This step though, it's really easy to mess up. It's a very delicate thing to do. If you are not really experienced with it, just ignore it. Just don't do it. Like the Boris Pryda says, like he doesn't use compression at all with his tracks because he says that it's easier to mess up the compression rather than properly using it. And which brings us to the final step, the static mixing. So doing this EQ boost and cuts here and there. You should be doing that at the end of the mixing or at the end of your track when you start mixing everything together, because static mix, boosting things, cutting the things EQ will completely change the timbre of the sound because it's not a dynamic, it's always there. So what I tend to do, play the track together and see if I can boost some frequencies to pop up some sounds, maybe give a bit more different vibe and so on. So if we play together. The first thing that comes into my mind, before boosting anything, maybe we can open the serum a bit here so that we can hear more of the highs. Didn't have that much, maybe we can boost a bit here. Much better. The other thing, for example, especially when we are talking about the kick, is it may happen in some cases that you won't hear the thumb of the kick. In this case, we have a very strong thumb and we are easily hearing it. In those cases, having a shelf like this may help with the thumb. But in this case, again, we have a very thumby kick here, and this was a main purpose of this kick sample pack was that, so that we have really nice kicks all together. You don't need to do those steps. And it brings us to the final step. Don't overthink, don't overdo. But other than that, as promised, let me show you also what this kick pack is about. It's basically, like I mentioned, if I go to my the folder, so you will find first the clicks. I add them in case you need that extra click so that you don't need to deal with the EQs and so on. So you can just add a click to hear the kick a bit more. Sounds like. You will hear a lot of this type of clicks here. And the kick, like I mentioned, we have 40 different timbres. The main idea is creating the silky smooth kicks, especially suitable for like melodic techno, progressive house, electronica and so on. It's like smoother genres. And for example, here if I have A1, I feel like this is a good kick, I want it, but I'm focusing on F now, trying to make it easier for myself. And then you can go, for example, F1 here. The same kick, different tail. So the tuned, so that you don't need to spend time for tuning and stuff. And how are these sounding? These sounding oftentimes very smooth. And of course, I made a small version of it for free. I know there are people, even like this one is cost around 14 euros, I think, and even 14 euros could be a big money for some people. And I still want those people to keep making music. So 10 kick for them. it should be enough at least for next projects for you. And for other people who wants to have a bit more kicks, extend their library, and who wants to support my channel by buying my products, there are a bigger version for them on the Mercurial tones. I will put the links here and on the description below as well. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you learned something, and I will catch you in the next one. Goodbye.